On the line with us is Sarah Burris. Sarah is a writer for rawstory.com. She writes about digital issues, politics, and is an expert on the millennial generation. Her Twitter handle is Sarah, S-A-R-A-H, Burris, B-U-R-R-I-S, or at Raw Story as well. And the website, of course, rawstory.com. Sarah, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You wrote, thanks for joining us. You wrote a fascinating piece. Here are 6 major facts that spell the downturn, or downfall, excuse me, of the Republican Party. And some would say, oh, gee, that's kind of self-evident. You know, you get young people and you get the Browning of America and all this. But you go a whole lot deeper into this than any of these things I've seen before. And I wanted to get you on to highlight some of these details. For example, I'm a member of the baby boom generation. And so throughout my life, I've seen the impact of a generational bulge, a demographic bulge on the country. And the millennials are actually a larger generation than even the boomers.
Yeah, we're mostly the children of baby boomers. And because you guys decided to have more than one kid, that's why we're bigger.
There you go. Or more than 2. Yeah, so the 83 million millennials, whereas there's only 76 million baby boomers and 65 million members of Gen X. What, in your mind, what is the biggest take home from this article and this research that you did for this article?
I think the most important thing is that there's a way that Democrats can capture the next election, and I would say any election ahead of them, but only if they do the outreach, if they do the work, if they ask for votes from young voters and get them to the polls.
I was surprised you've got a graphic in your article that's from the Circle Analysis of National Exit Polls 72 to 2016, and it shows that in the Reagan era, 84, the re-election of Reagan, 84, 88, the election of George Herbert Walker Bush, and then 92. Well, actually, it was just those two, 84 and 88. Young people, now obviously not the millennial generation, but the equivalent of that era. I guess they would be Gen Xers or Gen Yers now, actually voted in pretty substantial numbers, like 20% more of them voted for Republicans than for Democrats. But since then, the number of young people voting for Republicans has just been collapsing. Tell us about this.
Yeah, I think what happened in the 80s was everybody was voting for Ronald Reagan. You can see it when you look at the electoral map. It's just absurd how many people voted for him. So I'm not really surprised that you saw young people voting for Republicans back then. But the second you had Bill Clinton appealing to young voters on MTV, that was the first time you really saw a president in a long time reach out to young people, and that has continued over the years, predominantly with Barack Obama, who ran in 2008, who had a robust program that reached out to young people. So, I think the values of young people have always been such that it makes sense that they lean a little bit more progressive. They're pro-LGBT rights, they're anti-racism. All of these things have become more democratic values, whereas in the past, I think both sides would say, nobody wants to be a racist.
Well, or on the other hand, back in 1964, there was bipartisan opposition. Southern Democrats, Northern Republicans to civil rights. I mean, this is, from the era of the mid-50s until the mid-70s, I would say that dynamic was going on.
And then everything just flipped.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I thought was fascinating about your article, or one of the other things, there's a couple more, was you went through the issues. And the one thing I don't understand about this graphic, it says, do you oppose or favor the following issue stands? And then, and I'll share those numbers in just a second, but then off to the right, it says reps, R-E-P-S, and there's percentages. What was that reps? What does that indicate?
So I think the graphic that you're talking to is the one from Harnstead Strategic Research. That was a couple of years ago. And it shows, I think that's the general population, and it shows the difference between young people versus everybody else.
I see. Okay. So just to go through these numbers, the first one, 80% of young people, of millennials, believe that utilities should be required to generate a third of their power from renewables by 2030, 11, 12 years from now. That's quite substantial, particularly given that during the Reagan era, the pushback on that, which would have been bought by a lot of Democrats, is, oh, you want the government to pick winners and losers?
And we're starting to see that now in red states. I'm originally from Oklahoma, and a couple of years ago, we passed a law, I think, not necessarily banning, but significantly taxing solar panels. And now the way that they subsidize wind energy in Oklahoma is significantly less than the way they do oil and natural gas. So, and one of the fixes they tried to come up with for the teacher strike was taking away the tax bracket or the tax break that they give to wind energy companies. So it's just like all of these governments, are opposing clean energy, and it's not okay with young people. I think we recognize that gas runs out, but wind is forever, especially in Oklahoma. Yeah,
and apropos of that, also, there are consequences of not using green energy, and that is, global climate change. And the number two thing, 79% of young people think that we should reduce carbon pollution to deal with climate change and global warming. And here's the 78% of young people think that we should ban corporations from spending unlimited money in election campaigns, which means overturning actually now 3 Supreme Court decisions.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
It would.
It's the little things. It's the little things in life at this point.
It really would. But I mean, how different is that? Are these numbers, 80, 79, 78%, roughly 80% support for renewables, for dealing with climate change, and for getting corporations, who are the ones who are screwing up the conversation about climate change with their phony research and their phony, it's a debate stuff. How is that different from just 10, 15, 20 years ago? Or do we not know?
I think now it's more overt. I think we've seen in full force what an election looks like whenever you have third-party sketchy companies come in and name themselves something absurd, like Patriots United or Faith United or something like that seems super patriotic. And then all of a sudden, it turns out that they're crazy right-wing nut bars.
Yeah.
So, the result has been a series of elections now where even if millennials were not of age to vote, they've still been watching. And I talked too in this article about the insane consumption of media from young people. Most young people get their media from social media. They get their news, they get all of their information from social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or miscellaneous. And the result of that has been that there's just so much, and so many young people are now more informed, which is a good thing. And so they have these political opinions that are not necessarily based on their parents the way that young people used to base their political values on.
Yeah. And some of the other topics, these were all more than 50%, 70, 69, and 66% respectively. Legalizing same-sex marriage for gay and lesbian couples, leaving the decision on abortion up to the woman, and legalizing small amounts of marijuana for recreational use. These are all over 66%, roughly 70% approval on all of these. This really should define, I think it should define the future of the Democratic Party, at least position-wise.
It should, and those numbers are from 2014. Just to give you an idea of how that, I imagine that they're much higher today, particularly when it talks about legalization for marijuana.
Yeah.
Because you're seeing that nationally, where people, even like my parents of all people, are okay with legalizing marijuana. So I think it's just a completely different way of looking at government and at policy that the way that the Democratic Party has been doing so far. Thus far, it seems like anything goes. Everybody wants to welcome everyone and have a big tent and be accepting of anti-choice candidates, be accepting of homophobic candidates and all of the above. And it's just that's not what young people want to see.
Yeah, it's not going to work in the future for the Republican Party. Sarah Burris, brilliant writing, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Her piece is titled, "Here Are the 6 Major Facts That Spell the Downfall of the Republican Party." It's over at rawstory.com. We'll be back.